only four of us kids in Orlando, and my mom and dad met at Rollins College. My mom was from Ponte Vedra, and my dad was from Orlando, and like I said, they met at Rollins. And so they married, had four kids. I was the last of the Mohicans, and she left one night. We were all at the dinner table, and my dad was out at a business meeting, and she hit the road and did not come home ever. And my dad had to pretty much figure out what to do with four kids and how to reassemble his life. And so he farmed us all out to different relatives and divorced her in absentia and went on the quest to find a new mommy. And he did after a year and a half. And I came home and had a new stepmom and a new brother. And we were told to be a family. And so the stepmother really had a knack for making the four of us feel like outsiders. It was an unusual skill that she had. It was, it was really unusual that she was able to do that. But for our entire lives, until the day she died, she made the four of us feel like we were outsiders and unwanted. And that was very difficult for us because, we were grieving a mom, and, we were not allowed to ever say her name or discuss her or refer to her. And that was verboten, and we were to call her mother, and that was all there was to it. And then after they had been married for 2 years, they brought my little sister into the mix. And so we were now 6, and we were off to the races. And we had what you would look like from the outside, a pretty normal family and a pretty happy family. We were a drinking family for sure. The party was always on at the Johnsons. And in the morning until 10 o'clock, it was mimosas. And then from 10 to 2, it was Bloody Marys. And then from 2 to 5, it was wine. And from 5 till 10, it was mixed cocktails. And then from 10 till whenever it was liqueur and dark liquors and cigars. And so that was just the menu at the Johnsons. And so, and that was just how it rolled. And it was, party at the Johnsons, and it was the late 60s and the early 70s. And my dad, was a builder, and so he had a lot of, there was feast or famine with us. And so, sometimes he had 200 homes going, and sometimes he would have none going. And it just depended on, how that was. And when he had homes going, it was really, really fun because he would, when he was clearing land or had bought land and he was getting it ready, he had these enormous earth movers, and he'd be burning, big stumps and getting the land and then putting in the big infrastructure. And he'd have these huge, big, I guess the things that you move water through and sewer, and you put the things in. But, for kids, it was fun to get in them and play in them. And, they were made super forts. And, we built this fort that was 14 stories tall. And the newspaper came and looked at it, little doors. And, we became little craftsmen, so it was really, really fun. And so early on, when I got into sobriety, my sponsor had me read Bill's story and read the first 8 pages and asked me to go through and write yep or yes in the margins about where I related. And I just thought she was nuts, because how am I, a girl, successful at IBM, going to relate to, that's an AA, going to relate to anything from an old Navy guy drunk, right? And but I did as I was told. And 44 yes in 8 pages. So I identify. So anyway, my dad had his first alcoholic seizure when I was in 8th grade. But prior to that, we still had some pretty big family problems of us getting along as family kids. I mentioned that we were all kind of farmed out. I had one other experience of being farmed out because we did not really get along. You know, being told you can't grieve your mother, being told that you will be a family, being told, you know, all of those things, you don't really adjust well. And I had some adjustment problems, and I started to harm my stepmother. And you know, and I'm not sure it was on purpose. I'm not sure. I don't remember making conscious decisions, but there were steak knives involved and blood, and then I did drop a 5 pound pickle jar on her toe, and so I was removed from the home, and I went to my aunt's house in San Francisco for a year and a half, and in both of those places where I was in San Francisco and when I came up here to in Ponte Vedra with my grandparents, I really did feel love for the first time, because when I was in my family origin of home, it was a lot of physical beatings and mental torture and deprivation. And so when I was able to get out of those environments, I flourished. And then when I had to come back into those environments, it was just survival. And that was how I learned to survive, was just to survive. Anything I could do was to keep the peace, and I began to do anything I could do to apprehend anything that was going to make people unhappy. And so I became a peacekeeper and a people pleaser because it made me physically safe. And so I started to make plans as soon as I could to get out of the house as fast as I could. And, you know, even though we still did have party time, it was hell at home. It was traumatic, and it was fights, and it was manipulations, and I was always, everybody knows that grew up in an alcoholic home, everyone has a role. And so everyone's trying to get up on the other person, and everybody's narking on the other person, and all of that. And so, you know, that's damaging, it's tiring, it's exhausting. And in that, we're trying to, you know, my dad would go to one rehab, and then he would not, you know, he would drink again. And he'd go to another rehab, and then we'd go to AA for a while, and Alateen. And so in all of this trauma, you have hope, and then it's pulled out from under your feet. You have hope, and then it's pulled out from under your feet. And so, you know, your mental state is just terrible because you just don't have anything to rely on. And so, you know, you constantly, you know, would try to go to school, and I didn't have enough stability in school to be able to study well, you know, and so I was constantly not doing well in school. And so, my dad did have in my ninth and 10th year, he did have, he had gone to Hazelden and had gotten sober, and he had a sponsor that had become a very big part of our family. And the sponsor was, and my dad entertained a lot for his work, you know, for people coming over, buying houses and stuff. He'd come over, they'd write the contracts and celebrate and stuff. And so his sponsor said, you know, Chuck, if you're spiritually fit, you can do this. And so this, Deb, I'm going to tell you a favorite story. He was, his sponsor had come over, and my dad was going to entertain some people. And so he was prayed up, had gone to a meeting, had a sponsor there, and he was making a picture of Bloody Marys with his sponsor right there with him. And my dad licked a spoon that he had, you know, and it was just a blind, just, you know, we lick the cake spoon, you know, you just lick a taste. And it was just a mindless thing. And then, you know, his sponsor went, Chuck! And, you know, it was just, you know, he put it down right away. But my dad never drew for breath again, just from licking a spoon. So I will tell you, be very, very careful when you fool with alcohol. You can pay me my $5 later. That is my growing up. So I get out of the house, and I had, I knew God had my back because I saw, even in all of that, I went to pastor's class. My parents put us in church because it gave them time to get rid of 6 kids, go all in church. And so I was in pastor's class, and I heard very clearly, God said to me, "You're mine." And that made a big impression on me. And then in high school, I was very involved in Youth for Christ and the sports at Campus Athletes. And I accepted Christ in my high school. And I was very involved in that. And then when I got out of high school, I got my real estate license, and I also went to work for Youth for Christ. And then as things changed, and as I grew, I taught myself how to program, and I got into technology. And I began my technology career. And for those of you who know me, I retired in technology. But I ended up at 23. I moved to Clearwater, and I started a technology company with one of my clients. And it was very successful. We were going to take it public after 3 years. And when I was in that company and starting that company, I traded everything for success. I didn't realize I was doing it, but in hindsight, everything, because I had been, pretty much a little, God Squad kid, but I saw what success and what power and what money could give me, and it just moved God, booze, money, car, power. It just completely occluded God. And I didn't know it was happening. I didn't see it was happening. It just happened. And so we were doing our SEC filings and found out that one of our founding members was a convicted felon. And so that had a lot to do with our SEC filings, and it had a lot to do with our bank financing, and it all kind of hit the fan, and we lost everything. And so we had to shut the company down because we had lost all of our floor planning, all of our financing. So we basically completed the deals that were in flight and had to close the company down in 32 days. And so I went from here to here. And, when you are not solidly based, you don't have a solid foundation, I was just jumping into a blue ball. And I had, exactly what Bill talks about, right? I was going to come back bigger and better, and I would show them, and, started to come up with these grandiose plans. And finally, I was very, very fortunate that, the board of directors of that company thought very highly of me, and one of them was on the board of another company, and he said, "I will hire you and put you on this company because I think you can create an asset to the company." And it just happened to be a jet ski. And so I was so fortunate to be a jet ski. I got to be a jet ski spokesperson, and I was a test pilot for the jet skis, and I got to drag 4 jet skis around me for a couple of years, and I raced, and I was in boats, and it was a great way to train, professionally. And there were all kinds of party favors that were involved as well, and I had a fabulous tan, and I got to be on photo shoots, and it was a really fun way to come back from leaving the past. And but again, absolutely nowhere got involved in that. And so, when that was up, because the company was going to get bought, I did not want to move to Chicago. And so I moved back to Orlando and started my IBM career with a business partner. And at that point, when I was in Clearwater, my uncle told me I was drinking too much. So I just hid how much I drank around my uncle. And I would pre-flight and only have one or two drinks when I was with him. And then a girlfriend told me that I was drinking too much. And so I just quit hanging out with her. And so I did think maybe something was up because I did, I had a pretty screwed up childhood. So I thought maybe I did need to go see somebody. And if two people had said something to me, I probably needed to go talk to somebody about maybe there was something to this drinking thing, maybe. And since my dad had been an alcoholic, or was an alcoholic. So I went and started talking to a therapist about my childhood and lying about my amount of drinking. And so I started on that path for about 20 years. And, and it was nice to be able to lie to a therapist and have them confirm that you're not an alcoholic. And I felt good about that. And, it was good that, I'm not an alcoholic because I only drink 2 a day. And not, 2 double talls, I didn't even know. And at each bar. And so that was that. And so for about 20 years, I was able to manage my drinking. It really did kind of fall into binge drinking. And it was kind of always, what do you call that? Kind of okay drinking. It was like with clients, I was allowed to drink and maybe carried a little too far. Or it was a binge party. Woo, wasn't that something, And, we don't need to tell anybody that happened, and, okay, you lose a car once or twice when you're out, on an expense account. And, hey, Bob, you remember where we put the car? They didn't take the car, it's in the garage. Oh, right. Okay, good. Okay. That's a bad question. Yes, that looks bad. Okay. So those kind of things. Just that kind of stuff. Now it happens to everybody, right? So in here. The normal people, you never would let them know that. So anyway, so that pretty much that happened for probably 20 years. And about at 50, I was getting massive hangovers. It started to be, I could deal with them, but then, around 50, it was awful hangovers. I mean, I needed the marble floors in my house. I mean, they were a requirement because I needed them to be cold, and it was awful. And I would shake so violently, and it was just awful. And I couldn't wait until 4, or maybe 3, or maybe 2, maybe 12. Who wants a beer? Who wants to go get wings? Beer. Pizza. Beer. Brunch. 10. So, it started to kind of come a little earlier and earlier. And anyway, at 50, I had another one of those clear as a bell moments. I was laying in bed again, asking God, why can't I stop? And, cold rag on the forehead. And all of a sudden, bing, there's a bell again. You're drinking yourself to death. This is a family disease. You're not going to make it to 55. That was sobering. And I could list family member after family member after family member after family member in my family that started to really drink at 50 and really didn't make it past 55 or 60. And so I knew that I was not going to see my daughter graduate. I would not be a grandmother. I would not see her get married unless I did something pretty drastic. And those were things I wanted badly. And so I swore I was not going to drink. And at 4 o'clock, guess who had a drink in her hand? And that shame and that remorse and that emotional devastation was awful. And that continued every day for 3 years. And I could not stop to save my life. I just couldn't. And the shame and the demoralization of that was, I was so hopeless and so powerless and so, but I was always at that damn bar at 4. Sometimes at 2. And I would find, I started to move my business around who would drink with me at noon. I could make business meetings with at noon. Who was likely to be hungover and needed a drink in the morning? That's nasty. But I was successful. I was always successful at work doing it. And my numbers didn't fall off. They were good. And I continued hitting my numbers and doing my numbers. And it was so demoralizing. That's the only way I can say it. It really was. It was just devastating, that I just couldn't quit. So I would, have a dinner party, and I would plan the drinks to the nth degree. We are going to have Jello shots. We're going to have this kind of a thing. And then I was like, oh shit, I'm supposed to be, and then I'd slack something together, and have something. And then I'd be upset, when people weren't all excited about, what we were eating or what we were drinking, and people came over to eat and to socialize, not to drink, but I was all about the booze. And it got more and more frustrating because people didn't drink like I did. And they didn't have the same enthusiasm for getting smashed and hammered like I did. And, I would go to the bar and it's like, okay, shut up, let's get hammered or let's start drinking. And, I literally said that one time when we were with some friends in St. Augustine, stop talking, let's get a drink. I'm thirsty. And I was like, oh, that's really not the cool thing to say, I was like, oops, my foot's showing. In February, I had a 6-week trip coming up, and I was going to go to Las Vegas. I was going to go to Amsterdam. I was going on a wine cruise with my book club friends. I was going to go to New York, and then I was going to go back to Las Vegas. And all on a 6-week trip, all expense driven because it was all work, except for that 1-week cruise that was my wine buddies, And so my intuition was screaming at me that I was not going to come back from that okay. There was going to be some sort of beer-related or booze-related incident. I was going to get arrested for some sort of disorderly conduct or DUI or something. And my intuition was screaming, red light, red light, red light, red light, red light. But what does an alcoholic do? I'll take care of it. I'll manage. No worries. And, but I was really afraid that something bad was going to happen. And so God did for me what I could not do for myself. He intervened, and I am so grateful. Because on February 22nd, I had a client call me with a really big problem. They could not run payroll because there was a big problem with their technology, and they needed me to waive a big rule that so they could run payroll. I was going to have to release an invoice that was $500,000. And so it was a very close client because they actually were coming to my beach house the following weekend. It was not Memorial Day, it was Daytona Beach 500. So we were going to go to Daytona Beach 500 and stay at my beach house. So I was at the beach house, airing things out, putting sheets on, shopping, and getting ready for them to come the next day. And so I bent the rule, but I needed them to give me that contract the next day, or I was going to be in, or I was going to have to, release this $500,000 invoice. And so they did not give me the contract. They told me they weren't going to give me the contract. So I released the order. I released the invoice, the $500,000 invoice. And they were not happy about that. They thought I would just give them a wink and a prayer, just let all things go. But I would have been fired, and I had to make things right for my company on my end, And so I released the invoice to make my side of the street right. And, I got a call from their chief legal counsel who was coming over to the house and said, we're going to sue your ass to the sun. And I'm not coming over this weekend. I hate you. And, how can you do this to us? And I said, look, I told you what was going to happen. If I didn't get this contract, I was going to release the invoice. I did you a solid so you could run payroll. And, I thought we were friends. I said, look, it's not. I did what I was supposed to do. You didn't do what you were supposed to do, and it was a $500,000 mistake. And Clay, we're never doing business with IBM, uninstalling everything. And you couldn't run payroll last night without us. So and so being insecure, fear-driven, all of those things, I started to drink with the problem. And I drank with the person, and I drank, and I drank, and I drank, and I drank. And by myself, and that was something I never do. And I drank alone for 6 hours. And Jack is a lot of fun when he's with people. He's not really cute when he's by himself. And so I started to make some phone calls and some drunk texts and some unhealthy decisions by swimming at night in the ocean and texting about it and calling people and telling people about it and posting things on Facebook about it. And so people were worried about me, and justifiably so. And I called my brother-in-law and was just unconsolable, first of all, and then he couldn't understand me, and I had just drank enough where I was just not, what's the word, incoherent, thank you, sure, nurse, so he calls my husband and says, Laura's in trouble. And he was at in Jacksonville, and my husband had usually found my drinking kind of amusing, or had said, you work hard, you play hard, and had been, not I want to say supportive, but it really hadn't been that big of a shit show at home, and it really hadn't been that much of a problem. Well, things changed on February 22nd. He called and absolutely scalded my ass, and I have never been so scared of that in my life. And he said, you need to you're acting like an alcoholic, you need to get yourself to an AA meeting, you need to get your poop in a group, and you need to call your brother. My brother was an alcoholic and 7 years sober. And I was scared, even more scared. So, the fact that I was an alcoholic had not crossed my mind. The fact that I could call my brother and get help had not crossed my mind. And so a moment of grace was a call from my husband. And I was so grateful for that call. And so I called my brother Charles. And my brother Charlie had been to see me many times since his sobriety. And, he would see me have a glass of wine and maybe leave it, just because I wasn't in the mood to drink that night. And this is part of that unpredictability of alcoholism as it's increasing. Sometimes you'll drink, and have a half a glass of wine and get smashed. And then other times you'll need 9 glasses of wine to get just a buzz, and it was just that unpredictability. And so those times I had been with Charlie, a half a glass of wine had done the job. And so I called Charlie and I so Charlie and I were at Bistro X one night, and we were having dinner, and I was going on and on about this business problem. And he said, hang on a minute. And he ran across to the San Marco Club and he bought me this 12 and 12. And he said, it doesn't have that much to do with alcoholism, but it's a great code of living. And he goes, read it. He goes, if you don't understand it, he goes, just put it on a shelf. And I read it, and it was just gibberish. I didn't understand a word of it. And I had written in the cover of it, given to me before, in 2012, the year before my white chip. And so Charlie had, I had talked to him, and I remember when Charlie first got sober, we looked at him like he was in a zoo, because he was the first one in our family that never drank, because Dad was never successful. And so I called Charlie, and thank God he answered the phone. And thank God he answered the phone, because God had him there, I'm certain. And I said, I'm scared. And that's how I answered. I just said, Charlie, I'm scared. He goes, okay, what's going on? So I told him what had been going on, and he goes, okay, it sounds like you are an alcoholic. He goes, you're describing an alcoholic, somebody that is powerless over alcohol and can't manage their lives. And he says, I'm going to call my friend that's in New Smyrna Beach, and I'm going to ask her to meet you at a meeting tomorrow. And he goes, will you go? And I said, yes, I'll go. And I said, I'm too afraid to go to sleep tonight. And he goes, I'll stay here on the phone with you. And he stayed on the phone with me until I passed out. I'm certain, because I was on the floor in the morning when I came to with my phone and drool, so I'm certain I had charming. So I came to the next morning 15 minutes before the meeting, and I had a choice, and I could go or I could not go, and so I did go, and I went, just put my flip-flops on, did not brush my hair, did not brush my teeth, and went to that meeting. And there was a lady there that was brushing or sweeping a completely sand-free step, but she was waiting for me. And my brother and I favor each other very much. And so as soon as I got out of the car, she goes, Charlie! But, I knew what she meant. And so I went to that first meeting. And for those of you who are ever waiting for a drunk alcoholic, a donut and a cup of coffee is the thing to have then. It was so good. I mean, it felt like manna from heaven. And it gave me something to do. I was shaky, and it just was the right thing to do with shaking hands. I don't know. It was just perfect. But I heard what I needed to hear. Charlie had said, go, listen, take what you need, and then leave the rest. And those women gave me their numbers, and they said, don't drink between meals. Call us if you're scared. Read the doctor's opinion. And in the doctor's opinion, I realized that it was an allergy. And I just had to not put it in my body. And if I didn't put it in my body, I wouldn't have the craving. And my daughter had a peanut allergy, and I understood that. And so that gave me enough hope to get for the next day. And, I was my dad died an alcoholic death at that beach house. And I was 4 yards from where he died. And so when I came home from that meeting, I literally sat where he died and I read the doctor's opinion. And it meant a lot to me because I didn't want to be another statistic. And I really wanted, and I felt God there, you know, and it was all of a sudden, all those years, you know, it just came clear. And I have goosebumps telling it because it was such forgiveness and redemption. And, you know, I was probably still hungover, you know, but the fact that you can find that in an AA room just for asking and just for being willing and just for being surrendered is it's a miracle. And I'm so grateful. And, you know, the doctor's opinion and Bill's story do cover my step 1, but 12 and 12 describes this fatal progression. And I've described it exactly on page 23. By going back in our own drinking histories, we could now show that years before we realized that we were out of control, that our drinking, even then, was no mere habit, that it was indeed the beginning of a fatal progression. And so, and then after that, the 12 and 12 says at the end of page 24, we can stand ready to do anything which will lift the merciless merciless obsession from us. And, you know, with that, I am, you know, I'm ready to do anything. And that makes me grateful to be here and be able to share my experience.